In this episode of Embracing Autism, we dive into our personal experiences as parents of newly diagnosed ADHD children. We explore the similarities and differences between ADHD and autism, shedding light on how they often overlap but are distinctly different in their challenges and needs. Before we get started, don't forget to hit that notification bell, share, like, and subscribe. Let's get started. Hi, Embracers.
Welcome back.
This is not surprising to us at all that we'd be talking about ADHD. We honestly felt like with our family history, it was just a matter of time, don't you think?
That's true. And I mean, it's been kind of on our radar with our kids as they've been getting a little bit older. We've been trying to see, is it just autism or is there kind of ADHD mixed in? And with one of them, it was pretty straightforward that we probably didn't even need to
We
get a
probably didn't even need
diagnosis.
to get the evaluation.
Right. But then with the older one, we just kind of wanted to see because there were some areas where we're like, I guess it could be. So it's kind of like on the fence a little bit. So, yeah, now we've done that and that was fun.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So from my side of the family, I come from a family of 8, and pretty much every single one of us, with the exception of my dad, I think, we pretty much all were diagnosed with ADHD. And then Matt has ADHD, definitely has it on his side of the family as well. And so we kind of knew before we even had kids that this was probably something that we would have to deal with at some point in time. So we did decide to take our kids and get them evaluated, mostly because the middle kid, she's the one that seems to really struggle with like the hyperactivity component and honestly the inattentiveness as well. And she was struggling a lot in school with focus and honestly at home too, just being able to get her to respond to her name and things like that. And so we thought it would be beneficial to get her assessed in order to be able to better accommodate her at school for whatever those additional needs might be. And then we basically were like, but you know what? I know that for me, I flew under the radar with my ADHD diagnosis because mine was the inattentive type, which was harder to diagnose. So I didn't get my diagnosis of ADHD until high school, right before college. So I was already graduated. So I figured, let's just take a look at her too, just in case, and see what happens. And lo and behold, both of them were officially diagnosed with ADHD in addition to the autism, that combined type.
Yeah. And I mean, definitely on our middle child, because she has all the energy in the world and never like tires out. So that was
Yeah.
probably a pretty, pretty straight case. But yeah, it was interesting because I wasn't sure about our older daughter, but I mean, go figure. She
Yeah.
is in the mix with all of us since we're both kind of in that
We're all
camp
over the
as well.
place.
Right. So,
Yeah.
but it was good to know, just so, more so, I guess, for the schools. So then we have that kind of on record so they know, oh, okay, like this is not like her just like misbehaving or something. There is something else at play. Granted, they already
Yeah.
had the autism diagnosis on file, but they now they know that there's an ADHD one as well. So that can hopefully better prepare them for what they need going forward as far as like how to engage and connect with our
Yeah.
kids
And it
accordingly.
came right on time with our IEP meetings. It was like the week
Right.
before we
Oh my
got the
gosh. Yeah. That would.
diagnosis. But one of the things that I want to clarify real quick, because not a lot of people are familiar with ADHD, but when it comes to an ADHD diagnosis, there's kind of like 3 main types that you can get. And so there's that standard hyperactive type that everybody is familiar with. ADD, by the way, was combined with ADHD. And so now everybody just calls them all ADHD. So there's ADHD, the hyperactive type, and then there's ADHD, the inattentive type. And then there is ADHD combined, which is a mix or a combination between the hyperactive and the inattentive. So you can have ADHD and not have the hyperactive component. So if you feel like your kid has attentional issues, but they're not hyper, they can still have ADHD. It just might be the inattentive type. So I would still get them evaluated just in case. But our kids, we saw a little bit of both. We saw the inattentive, but we also saw a little bit of hyperactivity. With our middle kid, there was a lot of obvious gross motor hyperactivity. But with the older kid, it was more like fidgetiness and just like the inability to kind of like sit still and focus without having to like move around. And also just like attentional focus too, like kind of fleeting focus in and out where we had to kind of like keep her on task a bit. And so that's why hers was a little more subtle. But they were both diagnosed with that. And what we thought about was like, man, I can't imagine how difficult it must be for people who aren't as familiar with ADHD as like we are because of our life experiences to even know that their kid needs to be assessed because there's so much overlap between ADHD and autism. So today what we wanted to do is focus on what the differences between ADHD and autism are and what are some of the similarities to help you guys kind of get an understanding of whether or not this is something you should look into for your own kids.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, no, I'll just throw it. I mean, yeah, for our older one, yeah, it was kind of, yeah, again, on the fence because we weren't really sure because it's hard to know, like, okay, she's just not listening because like she's like daydreaming, not paying attention, or is it like kind of in that camp of ADHD as well? So, yeah, I wasn't sold that she even had it, but then obviously kind of looking into it, kind of reflecting on like her personality, it does kind of make sense since neither Leah nor I are the hyperactive type. We're pretty low key.
Yeah.
So I guess she's
Yeah,
more
it was
like
it was a bit of
more
a
like mom and
surprise,
dad.
but like not surprise at the same time. Like I had an inkling, but you could have easily told me she wasn't, and I'd be like, yeah, that checks out. But then I was
Ye-
like, it checks out either way.
And that's what I was saying. We were really on the fence where it was like, if a professional told us, no, she doesn't have it, we'd be like, oh, okay. And if they said, like, obviously, oh, okay, she has it, we're like, oh, okay. Like, there
Yeah,
wasn't like
it could have
really
gone
like
either way.
leaning right.
Yeah,
But yeah, since they both have it, I guess it's easier to manage because they're more so like us than we
more in the
thought.
family. Let's just keep all the ADHD. So we are
Ah,
now most of us are ADHD, autistic ADHD, and then you're the lone ADHDer.
the Lone
So let's go
Ranger.
ahead, let's go ahead and dive into this. So the first thing that I want to talk about is sensory sensitivities. So this is an area that overlaps between autism and ADHD, but there's also some distinct differences. So when it comes to autism, there are sensory overload moments that can lead to meltdowns or shutdowns. So for example, when our kid is really distressed with some sort of auditory input or sound, she might cover her ears or she might cover herself in like crowded places or want to like seek shelter in her wagon or something like that because it's either too noisy, too bright, too much going on, something like that, that makes her need a quiet space to kind of calm down. You can still have these sort of sensory issues in ADHD, but it's for different reasons. So with ADHD, sensory input is more distracting than it is overwhelming. So, for example, you might see an ADHD kid react adversely to sensory input, but it's more because they can't concentrate or they can't focus. So, a way you might see that is, for example, if our kid is sitting down trying to do homework, if we have the TV on in the room, then she is going to have a really hard time concentrating, focusing. She might be more fidgety. She might be more prone to emotional reactions, distress, meltdown, that sort of thing. But it's not because the noise is bothering her. It's because she's frustrated from having to concentrate on her homework at the same time that she's tuning out like different sounds and stuff going on in the background.
And I can relate to that one because I mean, just going through school, I'm thinking of how many times like I would have to like reread like the same sentence because like there'd be other noise or distractions and like I was like not wanting to engage with whatever the other activity was, but it was still like there. And so like it was hard for me to kind of like disconnect from like additional noises and like distractions. So I like keep like rereading the sentence and I'd be like I remember reading the words, but I don't know what they meant. So I'd have to
Yeah.
reread it again and again. And I mean, it takes forever to kind of get through. And it's like the most frustrating thing in the world because you're making zero progress with the work that you're actually working on. And unless you're able to control the other like outside noise or distractions, like you're kind of just spinning your wheels because you're not actually making progress towards like your ultimate like goal.
Yeah, I feel like this is actually probably the biggest one you struggle with because I could definitely tell that you have a really hard time tuning out different sounds and kind of like focusing on the one important sound. It's almost like they're all kind of equal to you. So that's
Yeah.
similar to autism, but the difference is that like for me, It's more of a volume thing. Like I can hear electricity, and because I can hear electricity, it triggers a migraine, and therefore I can't concentrate because of the migraine from the electricity I can hear in the wall. Whereas when I'm having an ADHD moment, it's more like you're trying to talk to me at the same time that I'm trying to read something, and because of that, I cannot process what I'm reading because I'm distracted by the sound of you talking to me, or maybe the kids in the background laughing, or whatever it may be. So it's like slightly different. It does tie into, though, the attention and focus piece, which is also something that overlaps in some areas, but also is a little bit different with ADHD and with autism. So I'm going to start off with the autism piece. And in autism, what you see is that attention struggles are usually stemming from like an intense focus on specific interests, like special interests, or difficulty transitioning from one task to another with that rigidity, that autistic rigidity. So, for example, our kid might be hyper focusing on like Mario right now. Mario, it's all Mario 24/7 right now. So she might be hyper focusing on Mario and resist stopping playing Mario Party or whatever it may be in order to have dinner. So that could potentially lead to a meltdown when she's asked to transition from Mario to dinner. So that is a shift in attention and focus, but it's directly related to the fact that this is her special interest, and that's why it's more autism focused here. However, with ADHD, the focus issues arise more from distractibility and difficulty maintaining attention, even if it's a preferred activity. So, for example, she might love Mario. Okay, let's say she loves Mario and she's trying to play Mario, but she ends up putting it down every like 5 minutes or so because she gets distracted with like her coloring, or she sees her favorite stuffy on the floor, or her sister calls her name and she kind of forgets that she was playing. So she puts it down and forgets to come back to it. That's more of like an ADHD thing where it's like you are basically starting a project, but you kind of leave it unfinished because you've gotten distracted with something else. So that's still a shift in focus, or a difficulty with the shift in focus, but a different way and for like a different reason.
Well, like for my experience, I think of inside my head, it's kind of hell like, I think. Um,
That's horrible.
but it's like there's so many different things that are like starting, and it's hard for me to grab onto one.
You're not a finisher, just a starter.
I mean, apparently, but it's like even with like work, it's like I have to check email. I have to log into my database. I have to request something. I have to do like send out a file request. Like there's like all these different things like that are like cycling through my brain. And it's like, okay, I'll start with emails. And then I'll start typing up like an email. And I'm like, oh no, I really need to do this first. And then I'll
Why
jump
am
over
I
there.
not on this list? I was nowhere on this list.
For work? Well,
Just
we
for
are
to
not
do.
we're not well, we're not coworkers, Leah. So, but there's like so many different things, and it's hard for me. Like even if I start with one and I have like a game plan of like, oh, I'm gonna finish this, then move to this. It's like I'll start with one, and then before it's like completed, I'll have to like shift gears and do something. Like even today, I was supposed to do training for work. Didn't do that because like I got distracted with like an email or something else that like flew across the screen or something.
You saw a
But
bird, a butterfly.
I mean, it could have been, or like it was like 2:30, and I'm like, oh, I should go check the mail, and it's just like little things like that that kind of like go into my brain, and it's like,
A chain reaction where like one thing links to another thing, links to another thing, and then you forget what you were doing at the very beginning.
right, but it's also like irritating because it's like, because then otherwise I have to put like a pin in it, and it's like I'm thinking like later, it's like, oh, I still need to get the mail because I'm gonna forget it, and then or I need to go get our trash can or something like other things that are not really like work related, but they're kind of like filtered in as well. But then because I got up to go get the mail, I forgot what I was working on, so then I kind of start the cycle again. Oh, maybe I should send emails or whatever. So that is inside my brain in a
Attention and
nutshell.
focus issues. Yeah. So that is unique to ADHD specifically. autism, it's more of a hyper focus and you lose track of everything else because of the hyper focus in whatever that specific special interest is, for example. There's also changes or differences in impulsivity and social awareness. So both autism and ADHD can have social challenges. So you can struggle making friendships, maintaining relationships in both of those circumstances, but it's often for different reasons. There's a little bit of overlap as well. So, like, for example, both autism and ADHD, you might have some of that impulsivity in a conversation for different reasons. So, like, in autism, I might interrupt a person in a conversation. So, you guys see that on the podcast all the time. Matt and I might jump over each other's words. I feel like I do it more frequently. And that's often for me because of the autism piece, not the ADHD piece. And what that is for me is the inability to really read the social cue of when the other person's done talking or when it's a pause, when it's okay for me to go versus am I supposed to politely wait a couple seconds? And so for me, it's really hard to read and gauge that back and forth in a conversation. So I often kind of talk over people and then realize, oh no, they're not done, pull back, and then I might pull back too much and there's an awkward pause. But that's not the case with ADHD. ADHD is more of I really got to say what I got to say and I got to blurt it out. So you just like blurt it out because you really kind of have to just get it out. It's more of like an executive functioning thing. So it's a little bit different. I do struggle with both of those, but I would say I struggle more with the autism piece of that.
Am I going to say something or is it going to be an awkward pause, Leah?
Well, see, what I do is I just avoid looking at you so that I don't even have to stress about it. I'm just kidding.
No, I thought it was funny because you're basically talking about the other one where it's like you need to like blurt things out. I was like, oh man, that has Leah written all over it. Because like you'll be like sitting there and you'll almost be like rocking forward because you need to say something so bad. And I'm like, okay. And then you just like go off on like whatever it was.
And that is one of the things. Oh, look, I just did it.
Yeah. but I learned just to...
I'll give you an example right now because since it's happening in real time, everyone. That is one of the things that is different also between the autism and the ADHD social interaction component. So like with the autism part, when I am interrupting somebody socially, it's because of that misunderstanding of exactly when am I supposed to jump in and when I'm not. This moment, this interruption that I just did was an ADHD interruption. And the way I know the difference is because with this one, it was that, oh, I have something to say and I need to say it, but I don't have the memory retention or capacity to like hold on to that long enough to be able to remember what it is that I'm going to say, pause, wait for you to finish, and then say it. Because that's a whole lot of stuff going on in the ADHD brain. I cannot focus on what you're saying, retain it, and focus on what I have, retain it, and then be able to navigate those things. And so you'll often see that ADHD people will just blurt things out because if we don't say it right then and there, we can't hold on to it. Like it's gone forever.
You're going to miss your train.
There is no train. I'm just like flying and hoping that I make it. So yeah, have you experienced, I feel like the ADHD side of that with like the more impulsivity or like feeling like you don't have kind of like the patience to like let the other person finish because you really have to say what you got to say?
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean, I think to some extent, well, maybe not everyone deals with that, but like you are always at a risk of like forgetting exactly what you want to say, depending on how long the person wants to keep like talking. Or it might, the other cases, it might not also be relevant by the time they finish. So like if you wanted to talk about like, your favorite fast food restaurant and I shift into a totally different conversation without giving you a chance to, jump in, then essentially we could be talking about like, oh, like we have to be careful of, our daughter going on a field trip because she might still be elopement risk. And then you just blurt out like McDonald's or something. And then it doesn't make sense. And so like, I feel like
that's more Tourette's.
Well, but like, as far as like if you wait too long to say what you need to say and you don't blurt it out, there is the chance that either you'll forget or the conversation will pass by.
Yeah, that's like our middle kid who has the more obvious ADHD where her processing is also slower. So she'll blurt something out like 5 minutes after the fact.
Right. So
yeah.
I guess that's her case. But yeah, I get it. And I struggle with that too. More so though, I try to take like a back seat for like most conversations in general, so it's less
Yeah,
of a
you're more of a pacifist when it comes to conversations with people.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
like more aggressive. I think it's like pretty obvious because I talk a lot on the podcast. So
that's
everyone
okay.
out there is probably like, Leah, be quiet.
It's
Give
okay.
him some time. I'm
It's
trying,
okay.
people. I'm trying. I've got ADHD and autism.
I know.
So, but kind of associated with that, and something that people don't think about too much is the relationship between the executive functioning and that routine piece. So, like the executive functioning part, like we talked a little bit about it, but part of that is like the impulse control thing. So that's like neurologically wired. Like you really just can't help with the impulse control aspect of things, but also the routine aspect. So autistic individuals and people with ADHD or ADHD individuals both need routine, but for different reasons. So for autistic people, there's like struggles with rigid routines and resistance to change. There's a lot of like comfort in having things be the same, having predictability, knowing the rules of the game, because then it's easier for you to function. If you know the expectations and you know the social rules, you know what you need to do, you know what your role is, you know how to play the game. So that's something that autistic people struggle when it changes, because then all of a sudden the rules change and you don't know what you're doing. So for example, if we have a change of plans, like we're going to be moving, I don't know, let's say we were planning a picnic outside and we're moving a picnic indoors. Our autistic kids, like the autistic part of their brain, might have a hard time coping with that unexpected shift because we planned for outside. And this is something I struggle with a lot. I have a really hard time when we have very specific plans and at the last second it changes. Even if it's like we were going to go to Burger King, but now we're going to McDonald's. And I'm like, but I was totally in the mindset of Burger King the whole time. And now we're going to have to go last minute. I'm going to have to change my mindset, change what I'm going to eat. So that's like the autistic part of things. But the ADHD part of things likes that expectation and rigidity more because it helps with challenges in organization, time management, task completion. So it's more that you need to be organized on the ADHD side to help you process what you're doing or like complete a task or get to the end of what you're doing. So both an autistic and ADHD person might thrive or benefit from like a visual schedule, for example, but it's for different reasons. For the autistic, it's because we need to know what we're doing to reduce our anxiety. We need to know what's coming up to be able to mentally prepare for it. For the ADHD person, it's more like if we don't have this visual aid that's organizing our steps and telling us what to do, we might get off track. We might get derailed. We might forget steps. We might forget our binder or whatever it may be. So same accommodation, different reasons, basically.
I can't even count the number of times we've had to have a picnic in the rain just because we promised it to you. I'm just kidding.
That sounds so
But
gross. It's like soggy food.
just eating our sandwich. No, but
Nasty.
well, it happened even tonight. Like if I'm going to like grab us food or something, and you are expecting like a certain type of drink, like I will like text you in the drive-through, being like, their machine is broken. This is what you're going to be stuck with when I get home. So then there's like a little bit of like preparation on your part, knowing like put your
Yeah, you give me a
expectations
heads up because
away.
you're a good
Yeah.
boy. You give me a heads up, so I don't.
So
Yeah, because that's the thing. If you came home and I was expecting like a lemonade, and you come home and I get a Diet Coke, I'm gonna be like frazzled. I'm gonna be like, what is this garbage?
but to be fair, it checked out because their machine was broken earlier when I tried to get the kids
Yeah, that makes
drinks.
sense.
So, but as far as the ADHD, it's funny because that reminded me of when I was in seventh grade. There was an intervention with my
Oh
teachers
yeah.
and me. Yeah, so there was probably like 100 and some seventh grade students, but I was singled out specifically. So all four of my like general ed teachers or whatever, they all agreed that I needed to organize my binder because I have a very specific ordering system where
Don't even.
it's like carbon
You have
dating.
no ordering system.
No, I do. I really do. It's like carbon dating. So like the oldest assignment is always on the bottom because like as you're stacking things, the newer assignments are on top. It works. Don't question me. It works. Because
That
like,
doesn't sound like organization. It sounds like you literally just put it in there as you got them and just like
Yeah,
shoved them
yeah.
in, and they naturally fell in that order.
well, because the most recent thing would always be on top because it's what would be on the top of the pile.
Right. So
and
you're
the
not
oldest at the
organizing,
bottom.
you're just shoving it in there.
But it's like carbon dating. The oldest thing is usually at the bottom. So it's
Oh my goodness.
organization. Anyway, so all the teachers had me sit down and they had me clean out my binder. And while everyone was at like not a recess, but like a social 10-minute like break from classes. So I was going
From
through.
you. I'm just
Well, no,
kidding.
I mean I found an encyclopedia in there. I was going through and I had like a random like encyclopedia in like my binder, but it was hard to. You didn't know it was there because there were so many
You
pages
had an
and things.
entire encyclopedia in your binder
Well,
and you didn't
just
even notice.
one of the books, like not like a collection, but like one encyclopedia was in my binder. And then they told me that I probably didn't need that, and they were right.
Yeah, I would think. I would hope you would have a whole collection. That'd be another issue.
So,
The
that
whole
was
Britannica classics.
right.
People
No,
listening might not even know what encyclopedia is depending on their age.
that's true. Pick a
Yeah.
letter.
So that's basically another struggle there is like that executive functioning routine thing, but for two different reasons. And then the last one that I want to touch on is the hyperactivity and repetitive behaviors. So with autism, there's repetitive behaviors that a kid might do. And these are usually like self-soothing mechanisms. So we're talking about like the stimming behaviors. So like our kid really likes to flap her hands, and our middle child really likes to spin. And usually they do this when they're experiencing some sort of extreme emotion. So like for our oldest one, she hand flaps when she's extremely excited. So when she's really happy, those are the moments that she will hand flap, for instance. But with ADHD, the hyperactivity stems more from restlessness and like an urge to move. So it's like an unmet need. So, for instance, our middle kid, who is the one that seems to be more of the hyperactive component of ADHD, she needs to do a lot of gross motor activity all the time. And this is very different from her older sister, who's also diagnosed autism and ADHD, but she doesn't have that need. Our middle child does. She needs to constantly like feed herself like gross motor input because she gets really restless and she feels like she has to do something with her body in order to be able to focus. Our oldest daughter, we noticed very subtly that she also needs movement to focus, but this is why we weren't quite sure if she was ADHD. But it is there. It's there. Like if she's doing a task, she's doing more of like the subtle rocking or maybe subtly tapping or something like that. So she's still moving, but it's harder to catch it. With our middle kid, she's the type who, like, if I'm trying to get her to focus on homework, for example, and she has to do like, what is 2 plus 2? If I just sit her in front of a workbook and have her do it, she can't do it. She can't focus. So what I have to do is get her to like jump 4 times. Like, okay, 2 plus 2, do 2 jumps plus 2 jumps. How many jumps did you do altogether? And then because she's incorporating gross motor activity, she can focus better on the task at hand. So that's more of like an ADHD component for her.
Well, also, I mean, we used to call her Possum because like she'd want to be
Oh,
like
yeah.
we'd be carrying her and she'd like throw herself back and we'd have to hold her. So she wanted to be like upside down as we're like holding her around. So like we've nicknamed her like Possum and Bat and Batty and all that stuff because she likes to like occasionally just like hang upside down. So, and she gets like a thrill out of it. So, I mean, and she's for the longest time, ever since she was very, very little, she's always liked to be dangling upside down. So that's kind of,
Yeah.
I guess, a way to
And
try and self-regulate.
I think that, like you just said, trying to self-regulate, that is more of the autism piece. So
Right.
when she wants to hang upside down, it's more like she's looking for that input, like whether it's vestibular, whether it's proprioception, interoception. She's looking for that sensory input to feel regulated and feel like one with her body. That's more of like the autism piece. So when she does that, she's not really trying to attend to any task. When she does that, it's just for sensory feedback. But when she does these other tasks, it's usually related to her having to concentrate on something. So that's how you can kind of subtly see the differences between the two. So to wrap up this episode, we basically just wanted to chat a bit. Like there are some overlaps. There are some differences. They can be subtle. They could be obvious. You really have to pay attention. So it's possible that if your child has an autism diagnosis, they might also have an underlying diagnosis of ADHD. It's a very common comorbidity when it comes to autism. It doesn't hurt to get them checked out. We went to a psychologist who did like the full psychological evaluation. And if you're interested, like just find a local psychologist who does that. Just see, because you never know if your kid's going to benefit from some extra accommodations at school. But in the meantime, we want to hear your thoughts on this really cool topic, in my opinion, because it's cool to be ADHD, in my opinion, no bias whatsoever. Um, so go ahead and share your thoughts with us. Join in the conversation, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at Autism Wish. Share your experiences. Let us know, what strategies have you found helpful for distinguishing between ADHD and autism-related struggles if your child has both. If your child doesn't, then how do you know? Like, is there a way that you are for sure certain that they don't have underlying different struggles like autism and ADHD? Or is it that maybe there's something lying dormant and you haven't quite seen it yet? I'm not trying to scare y'all. I'm just being,
it's like a scary movie, like just
yeah,
beneath
ooh,
the surface.
is the
like,
ADHD
ooh.
gonna cut him, jump out, and get ya? Um, but yeah, how do you support your children during situations where, if they do have a dual diagnosis, that you support both of these conditions? Because it could be a little tricky when you have two different diagnoses. How do you deal with both of them at the same time? And what advice would you give to other parents who might be struggling with navigating both an autism and ADHD diagnosis from your personal experience? Let us know. Again, follow us at Facebook and YouTube at Autism Wish, as well as Instagram at Autism Wish. We'd love to hear from you guys. Don't forget to become a member today at patreon.com/autismwish, or go to autismwish.org and just click on become a member. Thanks for listening, and we will see y'all next week. Bye.
Bye.